like blueberries and almonds, they weren't original indigenous plants in California, but because our research scientists could study them and figure out what are the right nutrients, what are the right soils, what is the right kind of water conditions, now those things are major crops in California, maybe even world leaders in California crops. So too can be tea.
What if I told you that tea is not only one of the most consumed beverages in the world, but has been at the center of diplomatic negotiations, rebellions, and national economies? Plus, it has health benefits that we're just now beginning to understand. Today, we're joined by Katharine Burnett, founder and director of the Global Tea Institute, and she's going to walk us through it all. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great conversation. Good to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
A pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay. There are 1,000 ways we could start this. I'm just going to let you tell me about tea, though.
Oh, wow. Tea's really fascinating. Boy, I'm a professor. I can be ponderous, so I can go on forever. But,
Ponder away.
It indigenously, it grows in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and then it starts to migrate out and be cultivated somewhat in northeast India, and largely in China. And it is in China that we understand it was first produced and cultivated and understood as something that could be healthful, used first as a medicine and then over time as a beverage. And then because it becomes so appreciated, the first book about it is written dedicated to how to make a good cup of tea, basically, in the Tang Dynasty, and then from there it spreads and becomes part of Japanese culture, and then Southeast Asia and global culture as well. I could go on, but that's a quick nutshell.
That's the genesis historically of tea. That's kind of fascinating in and of itself. The fact that it was recognized so early and celebrated for its taste, for its, you said, health benefits?
For its medicinal qualities, yeah. I mean, legend has it that the great legendary emperor, a guy by the name of Xiang, the divine farmer, is the first person who's credited for discovering it, and he was tasting 72 different herbs basically to see what was toxic and what was healthful. And among those, legend has it that a leaf of tea fell into his cup and he went, oh, that's an toxin, and so this is healthful. Now, if you track his time in history, he's around 2700-ish BCE. Archaeological evidence shows us that in China, farmers were cultivating tea, farming tea in 3600 BCE, so even 1,000 years earlier than what the legendary Xiang is supposed to have existed. So it's been active and desirable in China since at least the Neolithic period. It's pretty fascinating.
That is pretty fascinating, and the character of itself of tea clearly made a mark. Maybe it took 1,000 years to record or something like that, but there's another fascinating component to the story where it is starting to be distributed, where it's starting to find purchase elsewhere in the world, like via we talked about Silk Road,
right.
Things like that. And what was the other, Horse Tea Road?
Yep, the Horse Tea Road.
Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure, it's really fascinating. So there was the original Silk Road was between the then capital at Xiang, across the Gobi Desert into Central Asia and points west, and that was all about the trade in really the steeds, the blood-sweating steeds, is what the Chinese called them, Arabian horses, and in exchange for silk. And then through those roads came Buddhism and different kinds of ideas as well. But the trade continues, and then going from the southwest of China up into Tibet on the horse tea roads, tea was traded it was tea that was being traded especially for the Tibetan horses, and the tea was necessary in Tibet because it's hard to grow good vegetables that high up in the Himalayas, so they needed the nutrients in tea, and so that was a very important trade route. Going east into Japan through diplomatic trade, tea gets traded across the sea around the same time. That's roughly Tang Dynasty. But among the more, gets traded there. And then continues in what we call, is the Song Dynasty, say 12th century-ish. And then again later on. And that is what we would consider matcha tea. And then later on, in the 17th century, it's loose leaf tea and what becomes sencha in Japan. That is through diplomatic trade and through trade among the Buddhist faith and Buddhist temples. Separately, and all of that is cha. The Chinese word is cha. But separately, along the maritime trade routes, going south out of Fujian province, tea is also being traded into other parts of Southeast Asia, and then by the 17th century, it gets traded more widely into Europe and other parts of the world. So one of the things that's really fascinating, and you can sort of mark the trade across the trade routes, is where tea is called cha or chai. Largely, it was arrived through land routes. Where tea is called tea, it largely emanated from Fujian along the sea routes and the maritime sea routes. And because in the Fujian, a language in Fujian, the way that tea is pronounced, it's cha is not cha, it's de. So it sounds closer to tea than cha. And so the Brits and the French, tea, etc. And it's a linguistic, it's sort of a linguistic experiment that you can see how tea was traded around the world in different ways.
There's a lot packed into that. You touched on a lot of different things that I really want to get to. The fact that a single product is interpreted by so many cultures, even called by a different language. And I know that being in contemporary United States, we tend to look at other cultures' expressions of tea. So it was, for instance, the thing that got me was like chai. I can't tell you, chai and tea is redundant, and I can't tell you how many people have called it chai tea.
I know.
So it's just one of those things that we've kind of appropriated it and made it something that we're comfortable with.
Right.
But by the same, I don't want to go down that road just yet. I want to go. Right. You don't even know what road I was going to go down, so it's useless for me to say that. But I do want to get to this, the power of tea. I mean, nothing finds a home so deeply, so quickly, if there's not a value to it. It was one thing when you saw the Silk Road and like, oh my gosh, we've never seen garments this way, or spices, that there's an introduction of this new stuff that we hadn't even considered. Tea's a pretty passive thing, and yet it found immediate purchase. Like, what was it? Do you imagine that made it so?
It's such an interesting question. First of all, it tastes good. It makes you feel good. And so one of the reasons, the primary reason why it makes you feel good, besides it's a hot, soothing beverage, but the reason why it's a soothing beverage at all is because it has the component called L-theanine. And only Camellia sinensis has this, and maybe one mushroom, one type or family of mushroom also has L-theanine in it. Otherwise, it is not found in any other foodstuff anywhere in the world. And this L-theanine is this calming component that makes you feel better, is soothing, calms you down. And yet, Camellia sinensis, tea, also has caffeine in it, so it perks you up. It makes your mind alert and aware. And so it's this wonderful combination of calming and alertness that makes it possible to function really well. I know that when I sit down to work and I'm dealing with a knotty writing exercise, because I've got to get an article written or whatever, I make myself some tea so that I can calm down and get to work. But yeah, that's one of the things, and I think the world appreciated it, and because there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. I mean, I love coffee. I drink coffee on a daily basis. I drink alcohol and alcoholic drinks. I like those things, but there's nothing that substitutes for tea. Just nothing, and it has a special place, and people appreciated it and really praised its values.
And I have to think that the immediate adoption, or maybe it wasn't so immediate. You tell me, you're a historian, but of like important people. This plays a role in a lot of high governing bodies. There are ceremonies built around this where tea is kind of like, if it's not the main character, it's certainly a major player in the ceremony.
Right. Right. I'm glad you brought that up. So one of the primary examples of that is samurai culture in Japan. And so the samurai was largely took over the Japanese government from, I don't know, what is it, the 13th, 14th century forward for several centuries. And in samurai culture, the warriors came to appreciate the rigor of meditational Zen, both the discipline of it and then the alertness and the concentration that happens when you drink tea and then you have some role. And the severity of the Zen practice was also of appeal to the shogun and to the samurai culture. As part of that, and growing as part of that, developed what we think of as the tea ceremony in Japan, which is largely a matcha, whisked tea ceremony. And so many people may have seen the Shogun TV series, and so you're a little bit familiar with how a host offers you tea and then makes the tea in very meticulous kinds of format, and you kneel and you appreciate the cup and you appreciate the tea and the water vessels and all this stuff. What's really fascinating is that the most important, the teaware, and especially special tea cups, had political value. Whoever owned that tea cup had the power. And so the tea cup was infused with this notion of tea and sharing teas somewhat on an equal basis, because you had to kneel and you had to leave your weapons outside when you did this. But also the teacup mattered. Nobody could have this but the special ruler. And so you can see both the tea utensils as powerful expressions of power, but also the entanglement, ensnarement of art as part of culture and power, but also social value, social networking, the whole social milieu. And so, in fact, in the tea ceremony, just as an aside, the most important thing in the tea room is the hanging scroll, which might have a landscape or a painting of a flower or what have you. So it's really fascinating, the different kinds of things that are engaged in tea ceremony, both in terms of artworks and things that support it, but also the kinds of meanings that it has for a society, for the power players, and for those who just like it and want to engage in it.
So, it seems to me that the cultures that have really embraced it and kind of mashed it up with the power that they've given it are the same cultures that kind of really value what tea brings. They value that calm clarity.
Right.
Because I can't help but think of the contrast between our contemporary American society and although I understand the tea is making a huge comeback.
Making a huge comeback in American society. And I should say, when we think of, say, British tea and high tea, it's not necessarily per se that the tea shows power, but it is an exchange between friends and between if you're not a friend when you sit down, you are by the time you finish sharing tea. And I think that if you have good quality tea and you want to serve and honor your guests with nice utensils, a nice teapot, nice cups, and suitable foods to go with, it's both something enjoyable, but also something that you can share and enjoy, but also something that you can honor and make friends with. And famously, tea does bring people together. Tea is something that promotes peace because it's so soothing, and good relations between people. And I think that is one of the most fascinating aspects of tea. I mean, we can talk about the power because that's important. There's no doubt about it. But I really personally want to celebrate the peace.
Mm-hmm. Wait, I'm probably not overstepping my boundaries here and saying we could use more of that. So I'm kind of, if I'm looking at, if the general mindset of a society is based on its acceptance of tea, like we want to be the things that we put in our bodies, we want to be calmer and more focused at the same time, but energized. I think that's a good sign.
I agree. And I think also that our students want that. They really want that. You know, when I was going through college, who wouldn't have cared, you know, food was something that you ate and that was it, you know. But our students today care about what they put in their bodies. They do want to know where it's from. They do care about how it was produced and brought to market and brought to the table. And they are really interested in tea. I mean, really. People from around the world contact me all the time asking questions. I want to come to Davis. I want to study tea. Can I work at Davis? Can I do this with Davis? Can my company engage with faculty members on campus to get advice? It's really astounding. Even high school students write me. They're writing papers and they want to know more, or they want to come to our upcoming colloquium. And they're gonna. I mean, I'm just astounded at the interest in the American consumer at various levels, whether they're professionals or students or they just like tea, how avidly they are interested in this.
And their interest almost fights a current that's being kind of thrust upon them, where we're selling them things that aren't tea, but we can make more of a profit off of, you know. No offense to the Red Bull people, if you're out there, don't sue, but you know, like that whole, the mentality behind that, I can never imagine, or maybe I can. In like an idiocracy sense, like a political ceremony built around Red Bull. You know?
Right. but one of the things that's interesting, again, I'm glad you brought this up. This is fun. Thank you. The major conglomerates that have ready-to-drink beverages, RTD beverages, that have been very popular around the world and have sold them at great profit, are also starting to bottle tea because it's healthful and people are turning away from the sodas, too sugary, too much stuff that's not natural, and they are producing ready-to-drink tea, various grades of good and tasty, but nonetheless, tea's on the rise, and even the companies that you would imagine would never touch it because they sell other things, they're selling tea.
And I've also heard that alcohol is on the decline.
It is. I read an article in the New York Times recently, and I think that alcohol consumption, and I can't remember the age group, but I'm going to guess it was the younger demographic, it had dropped to like 64% or something like that, and then the most current year with a record, it was like 51% of alcohol consumption. Completely different from when I was going through school and what people were doing at parties and stuff. You know, I mean, it's pretty remarkable how much tea is on the rise by especially this younger demographic who is the future. And you presume if this is what they want to consume and put in their bodies now, they're going to want to do that as they grow older and have families and share with their families and children.
And I have to think that, like monks or like any other kind of person who's held any station in the world who actually values that calm, cool, quiet focus, it's a commentary on where this generation wants to go. They're not into buying for the sake of buying. We're not we would consume what we want. That's the message. If I were to assign a message to what's going on now, it would be that this generation has absolutely zero interest in buying what you're going to put in front of them. They want to buy or use or endorse something that's going to get them where they want to go. And what I'm seeing is they think by their adoption of tea, calm and quiet and energized is the way to go. That's who we should be as a people, and that's why they're kind of investing in this.
Okay, I'm going to say sounds good to me. I don't know how widespread that is, but I think that clearly tea is on the rise. I know that in Manhattan, New York, there are lots of tea bars that are showing up that are alcohol-free tea bars, and I mean lots of them. And they're prestige places to go, status places to go to be seen and enjoy and share a party, but without getting and staying sober and alert, and so it's an interesting point in the world where we are now, time in the world.
And I know you personally have said before that you think that there's tea is more than its physiological impact. It's more than its cultural impact. It's an opportunity to bond. And I think you once said, if I could get Putin and Zelensky in a room and give them some tea, I'm pretty sure we could fix the whole thing in a short time.
Well, thank you for remembering that. I have a brain like a sieve, so I don't remember that particular thing, but I agree with it. I think that tea does bring people together, and it does give people a chance to slow down. I took a group of students to China some years ago on a study abroad in the summer group, and I took them to a tea house, and they, 201, went, "Can we do that at Davis? Could we please do that at Davis?" So we're going to try to do that at Davis. We hope to have our own building with a tea room there. But I do think, and last year our colloquium, the theme was tea and peace, bringing people together. And that was something that was really important to talk about and show our audience how essential it was that we do come together, and tea is just a natural bridge. It does bring people together. It does slow you down, but not in a lugubrious way, but in a way that gives you a chance to exhale.
Mm-hmm. Which is the foundation of mindfulness meditation and things like that. It facilitates that. Yeah. That's wonderful. So you touched on the colloquium. You've had this since your inception. So I should mention to anybody who doesn't know who you are the director of the Global Tea Institute at UC Davis.
That's right.
And the founding director. Yep. So thank you for that, by the way.
My pleasure. It's been what an incredible experience. We pitched our idea. I pitched our idea to then Provost Ralph Hexter and said, this is what we're thinking of doing. We have a faculty research cluster on this, but, UC Davis, it could be even bigger. And he saw value in it. I don't know if I don't think many people thought it was really going to take off, but my then dean said, he said, "I'll give you some seed grant money as long as these other deans will give you some money." And they went, "Well, in the humanities and social sciences, we will, but so will the dean of agriculture and environmental studies." And then they went, Provost said we'd give you money for 2 years, but you're going to come back for a third. So why don't we just give you money for 3 years? Well, and so that is what happened. And Provost Hexter said, to get this launched, I want you to hold a big colloquium. Hold a colloquium every year. See what happens. And you'll get it some attention, and things will follow or they won't. To everybody's shock, the first year we had 400 people show up. And that has been a fairly consistent between 400 and 800 people. And we've brought people, important scholars and experts on tea from around the world for the last 10 years, every year around the end of January. So the event this year, again, will be January 29th, a Thursday, all day long, 9 to 5. Please come, free and open to the public, live and in person. And we've brought wonderful people to campus to show the importance of tea, largely Camellia sinensis, but also other things are consumed as tea, like chamomile or mint or yaupon or whatever. This year, so that was our first 10 years, starting off our next 10 years, our next decade. This year's event is focused on the theme of the art of tea in culture, science, society, and health, and the industry, always with the industry partnership. But also every single speaker is a UC Davis affiliate. And so I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud that we have built infrastructure through teaching and research. One of our librarians, Eric Fausak, did a study and found that our science health scholars had published some 761 separate publications on tea in the last 5 or so years. That means that more people than I know of are working on tea, and that's just in the sciences alone, not the humanities or social sciences or engineering that we have compiled that data for. But it's remarkable that so much is happening on this campus, and so to celebrate how far we have come through research, teaching, outreach, publications, and so on. All the speakers are UC Davis faculty, students, or visiting scholar, and then friends of the university, friends of the industry on the industry panel, who will be more international. But I'm really proud that Davis has come so far in 10 very short years, very, very short years. And
thanks to you and your efforts in making it so.
Well, I'll just say right time, right place.
Right, there you go. Right tea. Right T-O. So let me back up, because there was you touched on something about, UC Davis known for agriculture.
Yep.
Although we do so many things so well that you don't do us a disservice and just call us ag. But I have to think that the capacity there. I have to ask, is tea growable anywhere?
Yeah. Well, like blueberries and almonds, they weren't original indigenous plants in California, but because our research scientists could study them and figure out what are the right nutrients, what are the right soils, what is the right kind of water conditions, now those things are major crops in California, maybe even world leaders in California crops. So too can be tea. The trick with tea is that it is highly intensive. The costs for plucking, processing, packaging, largely it's the processing that is going to be more expensive. So it's possible to do that. Certainly we have tea grown up and down the coast of the West Coast, throughout California, and then throughout the West Coast and Hawaii. But even in the southeastern states of the U.S. and as far north as northern Michigan, but also in other parts that are farther, rather northerly, that you would never expect to have tea, Scotland, of all things. So it's possible to grow tea. Other parts of the world that are not known for tea growing, you just have to understand the science and farm it responsibly and in ways that it needs to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that a lot of the loose tea that we consume is grown in Argentina? Yeah,
isn't that something? So even though tea originated in Asia and then was first produced as a consumable in China, because of global trade, it is now farmed in different parts of the world, first in northeast India, and then in Sri Lanka, and then in Kenya and Malawi and other parts of Africa and Argentina. And as you just pointed out, in fact, most of the tea that comes into the U.S. in tea bag form originates in Argentina. And, obviously not original to that, but, coffee wasn't original to Colombia either, but rather to Ethiopia. And somehow or other it made its way to Colombia. Now we think of Colombia as one of the, of course, coffee comes from Colombia. Well, it's an import, but they do a good job.
Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of Argentina, only because I've spent time there, and the fact that they wouldn't exist were it not for an awful lot of work means that, it would be a desert if the Huarpes hadn't dug and the Incas hadn't dug the trenches that allow the runoff from the Andes to provide water inland. So they guard their everything, their terroir, like it's sacred, as it should be. But they don't use a lot of automated equipment when they're farming or harvesting, and their wine is like second to none.
It's delicious.
Yeah, I mean, I went down for a press trip and I had breakfast, and at the first sip of orange juice, I was like, oh my goodness, this is shouldn't it be allowed to happen? So I can imagine, I think if you put your palate in the hands of an Argentinian farmer, you're in good hands. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't surprise me that they would do tea really well. Do you see anyone jockeying for leadership in farming besides Argentina?
I think there's room. Frankly, I think there's room for many. And of course, China is the leading producer and consumer of tea domestically, but also they're a leading exporter. And the U.S., I think China has, as of last year, I think China was the number 2 site that we imported tea from. I think number 1 was Argentina, but then I believe that China was number 2. But Japan produces outstanding teas. Vietnam is producing teas. Thailand is producing teas. Of course, Sri Lanka or Ceylon is producing great teas and has for 100 years. So there, and the U.S. We spoke recently with a new group that is planning on farming large-scale tea commercially in the U.S. The way it's done, a combination of the way it's done in Japan, which is because there's lack of labor supply. Tea is mechanized in terms of production, largely mechanized, and yet they still produce a remarkable high-grade, delicious green loose-leaf tea.
So you've been around. You've tasted, obviously, the fact, I can tell by the way you talk about it so passionately. I have to ask, what's your favorite tea? What's the best tea you've ever drank?
It's like asking which is my favorite kid.
I have one.
But I will say that, it's like sometimes you want a really good, robust red wine, and sometimes you want a really clean, minerally white wine. Tea is like that. So sometimes I really want something soothing and clean as a taste, and so I want a really beautiful Chinese loose-leaf green tea. Sometimes I want something with a little richer umami flavor to it, and then I want a Japanese green tea. Sometimes I want something with a little bit more heft, and so I'll go for an oolong, say from Fujian or Taiwan. Those are the primary leading producers of those kinds of things. But on the other hand, sometimes there's nothing better than a black tea. And so, there's where you go. And I will say, as much as I largely drink pure leaf, what the industry might call a specialty tea, loose leaf tea. Sometimes I was in London in the fall for a conference, and you can't be in London without trying their tea, and so it was a black tea with milk and sugar, and with really super high grade black teas that we can get as a loose leaf tea. They're already sweet. They're already so delicious you wouldn't dream of adding anything to it. But with the kinds of teas that they're drinking in England, milk and sugar goes just pretty tasty.
Okay, now I'm thirsty. I've got some drinking to do and some research. I'll call it research, and that'll justify it. That's kind of awesome. I last thought. Future. Can I just talk about tea and health? Yeah, please do.
Okay, I'm not a scientist, I'm an art historian, but I have great friends in the sciences on this campus and around the world. And we have a book forthcoming in our new book series, the Global Tea Studies book series. This is the first book series in the world dedicated to tea studies. And so the inaugural book is one that 2 of my GTI colleagues and I are co-editing. And one of the chapters is dedicated to the science of tea and the healthful properties of tea. And she articulates, the author is Sandra Adams, and she articulates over 4 different types of Camellia sinensis teas, the healthful properties of different types of teas. And so some are they're antioxidants, so cancer-fighting properties, or a dark tea, as our colleague Yvonne Wan in the Department of Pathology and the Health Meds department at UC Davis Health co-wrote an article on the healthful properties of dark tea. What in Chinese it's called hei cha, black tea, but it's dark in English. It's dark tea, and how it can be something that's useful for fighting diabetes and high blood pressure and high sugar, glucose content, and there are like 6 different amazing things that it would fight. I was down in Colombia a couple years ago talking with a tea farm there and a tea company there, wonderful people, and they took me to a hospital where a study on throat cancer patients was being conducted. And we met with the doctor, the lead scientist on this project. And she had read some articles that had been produced in China about how Chinese medicine was using green tea as part of different types of tactics to fighting cancer. And so she did a study looking at throat cancer patients and using a salve produced from green tea in after surgery on the throats to soothe the patients to replace morphine, an opiate. And it was only at that time at stage 2 of a 4-stage study, but the patients were receiving it just fine. So that means that they could use tea instead of morphine as an after-surgery process. And so I understand the study has now been completed. I'm eager to read it and to understand what happened. I'm guessing that it was successful. But what that can mean for science, for health, for the consumer, for people, oh my God, what a turnaround to be able to successfully appreciate the healthful properties of tea instead of something that can be so dangerous like an opiate. And we can talk about tea now as a healthful thing, not just anecdotally, because we understand, people have said, stories are. Now the FDA, as of 2024, not 2025, 2024, the FDA ascertained and determined that tea could be labeled as a healthful drink. So there you go.
That's so weird. And like the answer was there all along. Mm-hmm. And here you had to go into a laboratory to create the stuff that tea could just do naturally. That's bizarre. I know we're at time. I know you really have to run. So I wanted to thank you. We pick this up after the colloquium, maybe?
Let's do it because it's fun and we'll have even more to talk about. Yeah,
there's so many places we did not go that I really want to go to.
I know.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Sincerest thanks to today's guest, Katharine Burnett. If you'd like to learn more about Katharine and the Global Tea Institute, check out our YouTube page for links to bios, books, articles, research, and more. And thank you for joining Minds Over Matters today. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and spread the word. We have a lot to say, and we guarantee something for everyone. Minds Over Matters is hosted by Ed Kiggins, produced by the College of Letters and Science at UC Davis, and filmed at the Wyatt Pavilion. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.